Hello, this is the Hall Forum, and my name is Michael Rickards. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to be here today with our distinguished guest, Bryan Lonegan. Bryan is Associate Professor at Seton Hall University in dealing with the law school question of immigration and immigration reform. Bryan, welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I was born and raised in New Jersey. I'm the grandchild of immigrants on both sides of the family. Raised in New Jersey, attended New York University Law School and then later Vermont Law School. And am currently teaching, as you mentioned, at Seton Hall University Law School at the Center for Social Justice.
I noticed in your background that you had a lot of work with the Legal Aid Society.
Spent 18 years at the Legal Aid Society, 6 years as a criminal trial attorney, 6 years as a criminal appeals attorney. But the most interesting aspect was my last 6 years working with immigrants, doing immigrant rights, particularly focusing on the cases involving the detention and deportation of lawful permanent residents from the United States.
I'm curious, how did we get ourselves now involved in such an intense debate on immigration? A country like this that prides itself on being a land of immigrants, prides itself on having a fairly open door policy. We've just gone through one of the nastiest and bitterest debates, even with the President of the United States and a Congress controlled by the other party. We couldn't pass anything resembling a reform package.
It's very I think it's very discouraging, first of all, but I think you've hit it, that this has been probably one of the most vicious periods of discussion in immigration reform in perhaps 100 years. I tend to believe that the problem comes from the two extremes within the immigration debate. You have on the one hand the immigrant advocates, and I'm probably closer to that end of the spectrum, but there's been a certain amount of, I think, misinformation that has come from that side as well as from the restrictionist side, although I would put the lion's share of blame on the restrictionist side. There's been the debate has been stated in such a way that it has polarized the country, and where there's no middle ground. And people are advocating for positions instead of for what's in the best interests of the country. So, for example, on the pro-immigrant side, I think one of the faults that we're guilty of is refusing to acknowledge that there is a legitimate complaint, I think, that we are a sovereign nation. And as a sovereign nation, we are entitled to control our borders and decide who can enter the country and when they can come. And the fact that 500,000 people are crossing the border, or I should say entering the country or crossing the border, and staying here illegally, is problematic. I mean, we should be concerned about that. It is a legitimate concern. So that those people who are focusing on that should not be railed upon as xenophobes and bigots. That being said, the side that is pushing for stringent immigration reform, I think, has been very guilty of disseminating a tremendous amount of misinformation. It amazes me when I still hear the immigration debate talk about immigrants coming to this country to live off of our welfare system, when in fact the laws are quite clear. Undocumented aliens are simply ineligible for public housing, for welfare, for food stamps, for Social Security disability. They're ineligible for any public benefit whatsoever, save emergency Medicaid. And it has to be truly an emergency. And at the same time, we tend to vilify the undocumented as criminals. And yet at the same time, all of the nonpartisan and reasonable studies in this regard have found that the that aliens, or I should say that non-citizens are much less likely, have a much lower rate of crime and recidivism than do U.S. citizens. And so it's a debate that's fraught with misinformation, and I believe that has caused our debate and our search for solutions to go into the wrong direction.
When the presidential race is over, and we have 3 candidates, I think, who are pledged to reform, McCain actually took the lead.
Yeah, and he took some heat for it.
Took an awful lot of abuse because of it. But when we have a new president, what will the parameters of immigration reform look like, if anything passes?
I'm deeply worried that when we get to the immigration reform discussion again, that we're going to be focusing on the wrong areas and repeating the same mistakes that we have made so far. All of the discussion tends to be directed towards greater enforcement, more strict enforcement in the workplace with employer verifications, the defense on the border, workplace raids, home raids, without addressing actually the root causes of the draw of undocumented workers. Fundamentally, I believe that the immigration issue is not so much an immigration issue, it's a labor issue. People come here to work. It's as simple as that. And what we need to be looking at is labor reform and workplace reform, and not at these facile solutions such as fences.
Good. We'll take a break and be right back.